Welcome back, fifth graders, to another riveting chapter or two in the Scary Stories Treasury. Let's get started. This spooky story is titled The Drum. And this is one of the longer ones in this book, friends, so get ready. Once there were two sisters. Dolores was 7 and Sandra was 5. They lived in a small house in the country with their mother and their baby brother, Arthur. Their father was a seaman and was away on a long voyage. One day, Dolores and Sandra were running across the field near their house when they met a gypsy girl playing a drum. Her family was camping in the field for a few days. As the girl played, a little mechanical man and woman came out of the drum and danced. Dolores and Sandra had never seen such a drum, and they begged the girl to give it to them. She looked at them and laughed. "I will give it to you," she said, "but only if you are really bad. Come back tomorrow and tell me how bad you were, and I will see." As soon as the two sisters got home, they started shouting, which was against the rules in their house. Then they wrote all over the walls with their crayons. At supper, they spilled their food, and when it was time for bed, they wouldn't go. They did everything they could think of to upset their mother. They were really bad. Early the next morning, they hurried off to find the gypsy girl. "We were really bad yesterday," they told her, "so please give us the drum." But when they told her what they had done, the gypsy girl laughed. "Oh, you must be much worse. You must be much worse than that if I am to give you this drum," she said. As soon as Dolores and Sandra got home, they pulled up all the flowers in the garden. They let the pig out and chased it away. They tore their clothes. They sloshed in the mud. They were a lot worse than the day before. "If you do not stop," their mother said, "I will go away and take Arthur with me, and you will get a new mother with a glass eye and a wooden tail." That scared Dolores and Sandra. They loved their mother, and they loved Arthur. They could not imagine being without them, and they began to cry. "I don't want to leave you," their mother said, "but unless you change your behavior, I will have to leave you." "We'll be good," the girls promised, yet they did not really believe that their mother would go away. "She is just trying to scare us," Dolores said later. "We'll get the drum tomorrow," said Sandra. "Then we'll be good again." Early the next morning, they rushed off to find the gypsy girl. When they found her, she was playing the drum again, and the little man and woman were dancing. They told the gypsy girl how bad they had been the day before. "That must be bad enough to get the drum," they said. "Oh no," said the gypsy girl. You must be much worse than that." "But we promised our mother to be good from now on," said the girls. "If you really want the drum," the gypsy girl said, you must be much worse." "It's only for one more day," Dolores told Sandra. "Then we'll have the drum." "I hope you're right," Sandra said. As soon as they got home, they beat the dog with a stick. They broke the dishes. They tore their clothes to pieces, and they spanked their baby brother Arthur. Their mother began to cry. "You're not keeping your promise," she said. "We will be good," said Dolores. "We promise," said Sandra. "I can't wait much longer," said their mother. "Please try." Early the next morning, before their mother was awake, Dolores and Sandra ran to see the gypsy girl. They told her about all the bad things they had done the day before. "We were horrid," said Sandra. "We were worse than we had ever been," said Dolores. "Can we please have the drum now? Please?" "No," said the gypsy girl. "I never meant to give it to you. It was just a game we were playing. I thought you knew that." Dolores and Sandra began to cry. They rushed home as quickly as they could, but their mother and Arthur were gone. "They're out shopping," said Dolores. "They'll be back home soon." But they were still not back when it was time for lunch. Dolores and Sandra felt lonely and scared. They wandered through the fields the rest of the day. "Maybe they will be home when we get back," said Dolores. When they got home, they saw through the window that the lamps were lit and there was a fire in the fireplace. But they did not see their mother and Arthur. Instead, there was their new mother, her glass eye glistening, her wooden tail thumping on the floor. Our next story is titled Wonderful Sausage. One dark, rainy Saturday afternoon, A fat and jolly butcher named Samuel Blunt had an argument over money with his wife Eloise. Blunt lost his temper and killed Eloise. Then he ground her up into sausage meat and buried her bones under a big flat rock in the backyard. To keep the murder a secret, he told everyone that she had moved away. Blunt mixed his new sausage meat with pork, then seasoned it with salt and pepper, added some sage and thyme and a bit of garlic. To give it special flavor, he smoked it in his smokehouse for a while. He called it Blunt's special sausage. There was such a demand for this new sausage that Blunt bought the best hogs he could find and started raising his own pork. He also kept a sharp lookout for humans who might make a tasty sausage meat. One day, a nice plump schoolteacher came into his shop. Blunt grabbed her and ground her up. Another time, Blunt's dentist came by. He was a little round man, and into the grinder he went. Then, one by one, the children in the neighborhood began to disappear. And so did their kittens and puppies. But no one ever dreamed that Blunt the butcher had anything to do with it. Things went on that way for years. Then one day, Blunt made a big mistake. A fat boy came into the butcher shop. Blunt grabbed him and started to drag him off to the sausage grinder. But the boy broke loose and ran out of the shop, and Blunt chased after him, waving a butcher knife. When people saw this, they realized at once what had become of all the missing children and grown-ups and kittens and puppies. An angry crowd gathered at the butcher shop. No one knows for sure just what happened to Blunt that day. Some said he was fed to his hogs. Others said he was fed to the sausage grinder. But he was never seen again, and neither was his wonderful sausage meat. The next spooky story is titled, The Voice. Ellen had fallen asleep when she heard a strange voice. "Ellen," it whispered, "I'm coming up the stairs. I'm on the first step. Now I'm on the second step." Ellen got scared and called her parents, but they didn't hear her, and they didn't come. Then the voice whispered, "Ellen, I'm on the top step. Now I'm in the hall. Now I'm outside your room." Then it whispered, "I'm standing right on your bed, and right next to your bed." And then, "I've got you!" Ellen screamed and the voice stopped. Her father rushed into the room and turned on the light. "Somebody's in here," Ellen said. They looked and looked, but nobody was there. The next spooky story is titled, The Man in the Middle. It was almost midnight. Sally Truitt had just gotten on the subway train at 15th Street after visiting her mother. "Don't worry," Sally had told her. "The subway is safe. There is always a policeman on duty." But that night she didn't see one. Except for her, the subway car was empty. At 42nd Street, 3 tough-looking men got on. 2 of them were holding up the third, who looked drunk. His head rolled from side to side, and his legs refused to work. When they got him seated between them, his head came to rest on one of his shoulders. Sally thought he was staring at her. She buried her head in a book and tried not to notice. At 28th Street, one of the men stood up. "Take it easy, Jim," he said to the man in the middle, and he got off. At 23rd Street, Jim's other friend stood up. "You'll be fine," he said, and he got off. Now the only ones left in the car were Jim and Sally. Just then the train went around a sharp curve, and Jim pitched onto the floor at Sally's feet. When she looked down at him, she saw a trickle of blood on the side of his head, and just above it, a bullet hole. The next spooky story is titled, A Cat in a Shopping Bag. Mrs. Briggs was driving to the shopping mall to do some last-minute Christmas shopping when she accidentally ran over a cat. She could not bear to leave the corpse on the road for the other cars to hit and squash, so she stopped, wrapped the cat in some tissue paper, and put it in an old shopping bag in the back seat. She would bury it in the backyard when she got home. At the mall, she parked her car and began walking to one of the stores. She had taken only a few steps when out of the corner of one eye, she saw a woman reach into the open window of her car and take the shopping bag with the dead cat. Then the woman quickly got into the car and drove away. Mrs. Briggs ran back into her car and followed the woman. She caught up with her at a diner down the road. She followed her inside and watched the woman slide into a booth and give a waitress her order. As the woman sat sipping her soda, she reached into Mrs. Briggs' shopping bag. Then she bent down and looked inside. A look of horror crossed her face. She screamed and fainted. The waitress called an ambulance. 2 attendants carried the woman away on a stretcher, but they left the shopping bag behind. Mrs. Briggs picked up the bag and ran after them. "This is hers," she called. "It's her Christmas present." She wouldn't want to lose it. This next one is called The Bed by the Window. The 3 old men shared a room at the nursing home. The room had only one window, but for them it was the only link to the real world. Ted Conklin, who had been there the longest, had the bed next to the window. When Ted died, the man in the next bed, George Best, took his place, and the third man, Richard Green, took George's bed. Despite his illness, George was a cheerful man who spent his days describing the sights he could see from his bed. Pretty girls, a policeman on horseback, a traffic jam, a pizza parlor, a fire station, and other scenes of life outside. Richard loved to listen to George, but the more George talked about life outside, the more Richard wanted to see it for himself. Yet he knew that only when George died would he have his chance. He wanted to look out that window so badly that one day he decided to kill George. He's going to die soon anyway, he told himself. What difference would it make? George had a bad heart. If he had an attack during the night and a nurse could not get to him right away, he had pills he could take. He kept them in a bottle on the top of the cabinet between his bed and Richard's. All Richard had to do was knock the bottle to the floor where George could not reach it. A few nights later, George died just as Richard planned he would. And the next morning, Richard was moved to the bed by the window. Now he would see for himself all the things outside that George had described. After the nurses left, Richard turned the window and looked out, but all he could see was a blank brick wall. Sorry, got a little spider there. Our next spooky story is titled The Curse. My dad's friend Charlie Potter was a small, nervous man who was always looking around as if he was in some kind of danger. After he told me this story about his college fraternity, I understood why. "The frat doesn't exist anymore," he said. "It was banned years ago. We had just 9 members at that point, and we're taking in 2 more, Jack Lawton and Ernie Kramer." One night in January, just about this time of year, the 9 of us took them out into the country for their initiation. We took them to an old, deserted house where 2 young men about our age had been murdered recently. The murderer was still at large. We gave Jack a lighted candle and told him to go up to the 3rd floor. "Stay there for an hour," we told him, "then come back. Don't speak, don't make any noise. If your candle goes out, carry on in the dark." From where we were standing, we could see the light from Jack's candle moving up the stairs to the 2nd floor, and then to the 3rd. But when he got to the 3rd floor, his candle ran out. We guessed that he had come to a drafty corner, and the wind blew it out. But when the hour went by and he didn't come down, we weren't so sure. We waited another 15 minutes and got more and more nervous. So we sent Ernie Kramer up after him. When Ernie got to the 3rd floor, his candle also went out. We waited 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but there was no sign of either of them. "Come on down," we called, but they didn't answer. Finally, we decided to go and get them. Armed with flashlights, we started up the stairs. It was as quiet and dark as a grave in that house. When we got to the 2nd floor, we called out again, but there was no answer. When we got to the 3rd floor, we walked into a great big open space like an attic. Jack and Ernie weren't there, but we saw footprints in the dust. These led to a room on the other side of the attic. That room was also empty, but there was fresh blood on the floor, and the window was wide open. It was about 25 feet to the ground, but there was no ladder or rope in sight that they could have used to get down. We searched the rest of the house and the land around the house and found nothing. We decided that they were playing a trick on us. We figured that in some way they had escaped through the window and were hiding in the woods. The blood on the floor was to throw us off the track. We guessed that they'd show up the next day with a lot of stories and a lot of laughs, but they didn't. The next day we told the dean of men what had happened, and he reported it to the police. The police didn't find anything either, and after several weeks the search ended. To this day, no one knows what happened to Jack Lawton and Ernie Kramer. There isn't much more to tell, he said. We weren't arrested, but the college disbanded the fraternity and suspended the 9 of us from school for a year. The strangest part came after we graduated. Someone must have placed a curse on us. Every year since then, around the time of that initiation, one of us has died or gone crazy. I'm the only one left, he said, and I'm in pretty good health. But there are times when I feel just a little peculiar, but Did I get you? Did I shock you? Maybe so. So, friends, that brings us to the end of this section of Spooky Stories for today. Again, next time we will continue where we left off in the Spooky Stories Treasury. As for me, I'm Mr. Lures. Have a great night, friends, and be careful. Don't eat too much candy.